All right, so we've been doing this class on Revelation, and I'm putting them on YouTube for if anyone misses any and would like to watch a previous one or something like that. And so that's what I'm doing, a screen recording so that I don't have to match up by hand the slides to the audio that I do on my phone, which happens sometimes. But anyways, so yeah, we're doing a Revelation class, and tonight we're doing another night of a movie night, I guess you could say, where we're focusing on images. Revelation, I think it's definitely fair to say, is the most visual book of the New Testament, at least, and it's such a huge emphasis on the message being communicated through pictures more so than the textbook method that people tend to read with the Bible, which I've been emphasizing that it's not meant to be read as a textbook but as a message. And so the message tonight, we're getting into the nightmare section of Revelation. It's a very surreal and horrific vision of judgment, and the message I can go ahead and tell you because there's no need to worry about spoilers because I've already given out the handout. But imagine if, here's a parallel. Imagine if someone asked God or Jesus why he doesn't judge, and then God shows them a vision of all of these horrific, terrifying acts of God judging those on the earth, and then it all ends with nobody repenting. That's exactly what happens here. So that's that hypothetical parable is what we get here in chapters 8 and 9. So the whole thing is coming after the 7th chapter, in which we see the Age of Tribulation, which is another word for the Messianic age or end times or last days. It comes from Daniel as he describes the last days as the Age of Tribulation, which John puts himself in and says they are in now, which will end. In chapter 7, we see that they're not God says he won't do away with the old earth until the number is complete. And John sees the number when it's complete at the Age of Tribulation, and it's all peoples and nations and tribes and tongues who have come to God. And so we know this is where Revelation is leading to. And so after this beautiful image, we have the 7th seal, which is, as we saw the 6th seal, if you remember, he opens it, and the point of the seals again is the repeated praise of the Lamb as being worthy to open the seals. So the point is, these are the things that the Lamb has power over, and things that the church needed assurance of the Lamb having power over. And so the 6th one was that the Lamb has the power to just do away with the entire old order of things and the whole old earth, and every mountain's removed, an island, and the stars fall from the sky, and then it's interrupted, and we see the 4 angels holding back the 4 winds, and they're told, don't harm the grass or anything that we just saw them harm until the number's complete. And so with the 6th seal, we saw the point was not that this is happening, but that the Lamb has the power to do this. And John is assuring his audience that God and the Lamb have the power to do this, and in fact are ready to do just that. But the reason they're not is because the number needs to be complete. And so that's the 6th seal. And then the 7th seal we have 7 trumpets. So as I've talked about, each one really flows into another, and it's really one long message. So it's not the 7 seals and then the 7 trumpets, but the 7 trumpets are the 7th seal. So the 7th seal is 7 trumpets, and like the 6th seal, is showing that God has the power to do this judgment, but also, like the 6th seal, again, the 6th trumpet has an interjection in which it all stops and an angel interrupts and says, well, we'll see what it is. But anyways, I have a long slide of images that we'll get into this nightmare section, and it's very dark, but a very powerful message, as I've spoken about many times. In my opinion, if I were to really sum up what Revelation is about in one word, I would say martyrdom. So they were experiencing martyrdom, which then in Rome was very public and very cruel and very shameful, and it was happening in several of the cities, and it just recently happened in a very, very public way in the capital, in Rome itself, in a way so public that this tiny minority group ended up in a history book because of this persecution soon afterwards under Nero. And the first reference we have to Christianity by any Romans is a historian writing a few decades later about this persecution in Rome. So it must have been pretty, and he says it was extremely cruel to the point that the Romans, who this was their entertainment, and who Tacitus, the historian, says hated the Christians, felt pity for them, and it instead made them hate Nero more because they thought he went too far. And so it would have been the worst, and we have descriptions of it, and it's stuff that would give nightmares, and it's very, very dark, but again, it was very public and in front of everyone in order for this, at the time, very, very small minority group to pop up in a history book. And the first reference to them from a Roman historian is in Nero's persecution. And so we have this martyrdom playing a central focus as not just Rome's, but as we saw in several cities. And so we have the 5th seal, which was the martyrs crying out, "How long, O Lord, faithful and true, and do you not avenge the blood of us caused by those who dwell on the earth?" And so we're going to get into what many, many must have been thinking, which was exactly what they cried out in the vision, which is, why doesn't God judge those who dwell on the earth? And so we're going to get into movie time. Kirk, would you mind hitting the lights? So this is one of the nights where I'm going to somewhat let the Revelation slideshow do the work, but I put in most of the work beforehand, as this is a big slideshow today, because like I said, I'm trying, and like you've probably seen before, I'm trying to break up everything that I decided was a single image, so that we spend a bit of time really dwelling on it and putting the picture together, which is something I know I can skim through and not do. And so this is a time for all of us to do just that. And I will go ahead and... So this is where we left off last time we did the images, and I'm not going through each of them, but this was the last slide. Well, I'll go ahead and read it, but I won't go through each of them individually. But so he sees the 144,000, and after John looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one can number, from every nation, from all tribes, all peoples, all languages, standing before the throne, before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." All the angels standing around the throne, around the elders and the four living creatures, they fell on their faces before the throne, worshipped God, saying, "Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen." One of the elders addresses John, saying, "Who are these, clothed in white robes, and from where have they come?" John says to him, "Sir, you know." And he says to John, "These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple, and the one sitting on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They will not hunger any more, nor will they thirst any more. No, nor shall the sun fall on them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from the eyes of these." When the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And John sees the seven angels who stand before God, and they were given seven trumpets. Okay, so I'm going to, even though I haven't done this before tonight, I'm just going to talk about it while I do this rather than all through once. But John sees the seven angels. So this is something that is interesting because instead of course, seven angels, the implies this is something that we would know as the, and we see there's not only this message doesn't just show a very strong vengeance that would make even those who wanted vengeance uncomfortable, but we see a very personal touch to it, as we'll see it's from the prayers, but the ones who blow the trumpets, who are given the seven trumpets, are these seven angels. And if you remember, the only other group of seven angels that this could be referring to is in Revelation 1, when Jesus refers to the seven angels, who are the angels of the seven churches. And so we have a very personal act of vengeance in the answering of the prayers, as the angels of their own churches are the ones who are calling upon this vengeance on the nations. And so Another messenger with a gold. Oh, also, one thing while this slide is up, my notes are a little scattered, but so I may realize retrospectively when the best place to make certain comments are, but we see also something interesting is that they're given the 7 trumpets before the prayers are given to God and before God hears them to respond. And so it's a parallel of how after we see the Lamb showing his power to do away with the old, we see that there are 4 angels standing there holding back the winds that are just ready to do it. We see this time, before the prayers being answered, how 7 angels are standing right there ready to do it. And then, so this is a very, like I said, demonic judgment scene in these 2 chapters. And it's very, like I said, even those who want judgment would be uncomfortable. It's very much a, you want judgment, I'll show you judgment type of 2 chapters. And it's, and then it ends with, in contrast to God, who is the creator and wants to reconcile all things to himself, the king of demons, who John calls this time, instead of Satan, Abaddon, which means destruction. And so there's this contrast to destruction as what Satan does, and what we had earlier with God as the one who reconciles all things to himself. And the elders lay down their crowns and say, by your will all things existed. Yes, we're created. But that being said, it is still very important for John to affirm that there will be justice and judgment. And so it is very important for him that all these Old Testament prophecies of judgment, which appear to not be coming true, especially as this major crisis with Nero and Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed, ended with Nero, who was at that point the last of the only dynasty of emperors, dying, and Rome went into a chaos, and it seemed like their fate was uncertain, and it seemed like the empire might end. But Vespasian, who was even the one in charge of the siege of Jerusalem, he would end up becoming emperor and restoring order and the Pax Romana, and everyone would be happy and arrogant and confident in Rome again. And so really the cherry on top to the crisis was that Rome, which seemed to be about to die, actually was restored under the one who led the siege of Jerusalem, and he'd be succeeded by Titus, who was the one who finished the siege and destroyed the temple. And so it is very important that John affirms judgment will happen, but not here. We'll see a very strong parallel in Revelation 16, which I'll, of course, talk more about there. But there we see 7 angels with 7 bowls of judgment, and there's a major difference in that these are obviously, there's wordplay that connects these with these to show that judgment actually will happen, but all of the demonic connotations are removed, and a lot of Exodus 10 plagues connotations are added. So it's much more of a deliverance-themed judgment than a judgment for judgment's sake, as well as the 6th judgment, the 6th bowl of wrath, also has an interjection in which we see Satan, the beast, and the false prophet lead and try and gather up everyone to go with them to their destruction. And Jesus interrupts the narrative right when it's already interrupted to show Satan and the beast and false prophet try and gather everyone to follow them to destruction. But then there's another interruption by Jesus who says, "Behold, I come as a thief in the night, so keep watch." So there's another sense that Revelation 16, which is the real judgment, isn't just for judgment's sake, but also a warning to the church. It serves as not just glorifying and violence, but it's a warning. You better not sell out to the world. You better be faithful and be a faithful witness. And then most of all, we see the biggest difference is that here the judgment is just on, first off, really just the world in general, and then specifically those without the seal of God. While in 16, John goes in great detail to clarify each time it's those who have seen the witness of Christ and the testimony of the church and chose to take in the mark of the beast instead. So again, that's not to say this whole thing is saying that there will be no judgment, because that's very important for John and his audience, but it is setting up this difference from judgment for judgment's sake and for deliverance, and to warn the church of what happens when they choose, even after seeing the testimony of Christ and the martyrs. And also it's this sense of, as well, weeding out and getting rid of those with the mark of the beast for the kingdom. And so all that we'll talk more about in 16, but this is a good moment to say that, and a good moment to say, which I'll talk about also in a second, that there was the incense offering was a time of prayer at the temple. And so this is one of many references to John's and his audience being aware of the temple, and obviously John, but probably a good bit of his audience on pilgrimages were at the temple, because the incense offering was the time of prayer and the time where everyone would be silent to let God hear their prayers. And it was this group moment of silence that was supposed to represent God hearing the prayers. And tradition says it lasted about half an hour. And so we're about to see the heavenly equivalent of the prayers going up to reach God. And so another messenger, and like I said, messenger and angel are the same word, and I figured for these two chapters, since they're so surreal and bizarre, I'd use the more literal translation. With a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer, the prayers of all the saints. And then this is, not going to read all of it, but this is about the incense offering in Exodus. And I want to say it is interesting, just the theme of testimony in Revelation, how the incense offering was before the Ark of the Covenant, which also was called the Ark of the Testimony. And it was, and I can just read a little bit since I have it, but you shall make an altar on which to burn incense. You shall make it of acacia wood, and you shall put it in front of the veil that is above the Ark of the Testimony, and in front of the mercy seat that is above the testimony, where I will meet with you. And then this is, I'll just read the a little bit again, and the priest shall dip his, and this is for one of the atonement sacrifices. The priest shall dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle part of the blood 7 times before the Lord in front of the veil of the sanctuary. And this is on the incense altar. And the priest shall put some of the blood on the horns of the altar of the fragrant incense before the Lord that is in the tent of meeting. And then this is, he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense. So, like I said, the angels had the censers with the prayers of the saints, that the cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony. And then this is just another one of some of the stuff that made up the incense, but then again at the end, before the testimony in the tent of meeting, for I shall meet you, it shall be most holy for you. And then this is another part of Revelation where it's actually mentioned earlier, where we see all of this about the who is worthy, and then weep no more, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And then we see after he takes the scroll, the 4 living creatures and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. So we see this was set up a little bit earlier, the incense, which are the prayers of the saints. So I have a lot of pictures that I'm going to go through pretty quickly because I don't want anyone to have one specific image because we don't know exactly what these things looked like. And also, I think it's much more powerful to let these words provoke from your imagination, but pictures are also very helpful. So the top right in the other picture is the altar of incense, and you see he's holding in the picture on the left what the censer may have looked like. And then some more various pictures. Again, the left one, a model of the altar, and then what the censer may have looked like at the bottom. And then that's probably not what the censer looked like, but it's definitely possible. So, thought it'd be interesting to throw into. You can see this one has the blood on the horns. And then these are not Israelite, but they are Egyptian reliefs of, they're each holding a censer which had incense in it. And then the left one actually is from Israel. It's an incense altar, but it's not the incense altar, but still it's pretty cool that it's actually from Israel, Megiddo, which is in Israel. And then this is from a cool pamphlet that I got at the old Christian bookstore in the mall. And with today's technology, you can scan this and put it on here. So I have a nice arrow pointing where in the tabernacle it would have been. And then I'll just read the first paragraph. The high priest burnt incense on the altar of incense every morning and evening. The 4 corners of the altar each had a horn and a crown or molding on the edge. Once a year on the Day of Atonement, the horns of the altar were sprinkled with the blood of the sin offering. And then there's a cover of the pamphlet. If you want it, I like it, or pamphlet or booklet. It says Rose Publishing at the bottom, so maybe you can find it by looking that up. there's also one of the temple. So bottom right, number 7, which I also have an arrow, but I just realized the arrow is black and so is the background. So, but it's okay, yeah. That's in the temple where the incense altar went. And then this is just what the pamphlet said about it. The temple one, which is shorter, but I thought good too. Prayers were offered at the gold altar of incense, where special sweet incense required by God was burned. The prayers of God's people are a sweet incense to God. And then there's Herod's temple, so the temple in the time of Jesus and up until it was destroyed. And it's in the big sanctuary, which is F at the top, the tall building. And so he came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer, the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense, the prayers of the saints, rose up before God. Oh, this one. So this tradition of the incense and prayer is at the very beginning of Luke's gospel. When Zachariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. And then that may have been an accident slide. And so this is a reminder of what the prayers are when he says the prayers of the saints, the prayers of those having been slain. And they were crying out in a loud voice, saying, "How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not judge and avenge the blood of us caused by those dwelling upon the earth?" And so we'll see one of the reasons I've talked about chiasms is we see this is answered in a reverse order. The first one being, "How long, O Lord, holy and true?" And the second, which is answered next, "But first, do you not judge and avenge the blood of us caused by those dwelling on the earth?" So the 7 messengers with the 7 trumpets prepare to blast afterwards. And when the first messenger blasts, the hail and the fire, which is the fire from the altar that was burned by the censer and is now thrown down, mixed with blood, cast down on the earth. And so there's a powerful message of God is now avenging the martyrs as their blood is now pouring down onto earth. And then we see later, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth." And so another reference to "do not judge" caused by those dwelling on the earth. And then the first one, which we'll get to next class or so, but I'll go ahead and show the one, "How long?" In chapter 10, like I said, there's this interjection after the 6th trumpet. In the same way, the 6th seal has an interjection in which an angel says, "There will be no more delay. But in the days when the 7th angel is about to sound his trumpet, the mystery of God will be accomplished, just as he announced to his servants the prophets." And the mess rose up before God from the hand of the messenger, and the messenger took the censer, filled it with fire, the fire from the altar. He hurled it onto the earth. There came loud tolls of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake, which I talked about this way back when I talked about chapters 2 and 3, but several of these cities had faced serious earthquakes, so I'm sure, I don't know who's experienced an earthquake, but they had experienced in their lifetimes not all of them, but some of them, earthquakes that, Laodicea specifically, earthquakes that destroyed a gigantic amount of the city. And so I'm sure, even though I haven't been in one, I'm sure being in a situation where the earth starts shaking and everything's being destroyed, this would especially resonate. In addition to what I brought up earlier, the Mount Sinai connotation, which is there for a lot of the earthquakes of Revelation, has a more prominent one. And the 7 messengers with the 7 trumpets prepare to blast. I wanted to fit it in. So the first messenger blasts his trumpet. Hail and fire mixed with blood is cast down onto the earth. And so again, I'm just highlighting this personal nature of this being an answer to the prayers, as their church's angels are calling on the vengeance and blasting, this response of them praying to God, and God responds through a loud trumpet blast, and it's by their angels. But not only that, it's the fire is from the altar of their prayers, and it's hurled on the earth with the blood of this, again, omen that the blood pouring down is the judgment now for the blood they shed. And most of these next few trumpets have many connotations, but some of which they were considered omens of war, and so, or destruction in general, but especially war. And so the first 4 trumpets are even foreshadowing the 5th and 6th, which are this giant satanic army of locusts and whatnot. A third of the earth is consumed by fire, and a third of the trees and all green grass. And this parallels when the angel says, don't hurt the trees or the grass until the number's complete, as we're seeing God saying, like I said, it's kind of like, you want judgment, I'll give you judgment, and I'll give it right now, basically. And so the third, like I said, Numbers and Revelation are meant to tie into other numbers, either from the Old Testament or Revelation or both. It's basically pretty much always doing the same thing that Jesus did when he picked. There are exceptions, but mostly it's doing the same thing that Jesus did when he picked the 12 disciples. The number 12 has a connotation obvious with the 12 sons of Israel. And so it's the same thing most of the time. It wants you to associate it with something else with that number. And so in Revelation, we see Satan, his tail sweeps down a third of the stars of heaven, which are later also called, his angels. And so it gives we see lots of a third is destroyed, a third is destroyed, a third is destroyed, and it gives, again, this satanic connotation to all these judgments, which is an extra horrific thing. And so the second messenger blasts his trumpet, and something like a flaming mega mountain with fire is cast into the sea. And so this is a powerful way of describing a star as this vision, which has been so cosmic and ethereal in heaven, is now coming down in a very physical way into the physical earth, as John's been in the stars, and now we see that coming down is this, again, very physical image of the judgment coming down as the mega mountain with fires cast into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea were dying. A third of the ships perished. Oh, and also, this is a big, this, of course, would have been stood out more in John's day and age because the grass burning up and trees would be especially devastating, and the ships perishing, especially for Rome, which much of their power, both from the economy and military power, came from trade and the navy. And so, but not only that, just in general, it would have been especially devastating. And so a mega star flaming like a torch, so now we've upgraded from a mega mountain flaming to a mega star flaming, fell from out of heaven on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood. A third of the waters turned into wormwood oil, and many people died from the bitter waters. The fourth messenger blasts his trumpet. A third of the sun, moon, and stars were struck. A third of them were darkened. A third of the day was without light, the night likewise. And as John looked, he heard an eagle flying mid-sky, calling out in a loud voice, "Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, for what is to be from the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the three messengers left." And then this is from Luke's gospel. It's a story in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But so the man with many demons, Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. And so we see here what Revelation also has, which is the abyss, which is, brought this up a little bit last week, but separate from the underworld as being the place where demons are stored, which here, and then eventually Satan, before they're all thrown into the lake of fire, which is different from the abyss and underworld. But anyway, so the abyss, we see this image of the demons begging Jesus not to order them to go into the abyss. So it's this image of a place where demons are stored and kept for one reason or another, I suppose. And so the fifth messenger sounds his trumpet, and John sees a star having fallen out of heaven to the earth. So maybe a implication of one of the what Revelation talks about as Satan casting the stars down from heaven. A key of the pit of the abyss was given to it. He opens the pit of the abyss. Smoke rises out of the pit like the smoke of a mega furnace, and the sun and the air were covered by darkness, by the smoke of the pit, and locusts came forth out of the smoke unto the earth. Power was given to them, possessing power like the scorpions of the earth. It was said to them that they shall not harm the grass of the earth, nor any green thing, nor any tree, but not the humans not having the seal of God on their foreheads. So this is sort of a literal version, which I brought up, but John uses kind of countercultural, weird, shocking ways of phrasing things sometimes. So here's the altered version. It was said to them that they would be unable to harm the grass of the earth and any green thing and any tree, but not the humans. So basically they're banned from these things, but not humans. So as opposed to regular locusts who don't eat humans but eat grass and trees. These do not eat grass or trees but only go after humans. And this is a big Joel reference. Like I said, John has really continuous allusions, almost one long continuous string of allusions to Old Testament passages, and I haven't gone over all of them, but here's a big one here is in Joel opens up with, "Hear this, you elders, give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in your days, or in the days of your fathers? What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten." And then, I think the other slide I have from Joel is later. So we have, anyways, first off, this obvious swarm of locusts coming for judgment. "And it was given to them that they shall examine by applying torture grievously 5 months." And we read from Pliny's letter last week about the examining the Christians through torture. He says specifically the deaconesses, but then also just others were being tortured to try and figure out what to do. And so we have this inverse of this satanic army examining through torture the Gentiles, "But they shall not kill them. And the application of their torture was like torture of a scorpion, when it might strike a man. In those days mankind will seek death and cannot, lest they find it. They will long to die, and death shall flee from them. And the appearance of the locusts was like horses, having been prepared for battle. Something like crowns, resembling gold, were on the heads of theirs. Their faces were like humans' faces. They had hair like women's hair. The teeth were like those of lions. They had breastplates, like breastplates made of iron. The noise of the wings, like chariots of many horses rushing into battle." So again, Joel 1 has these locusts attacking, and then we see this is, "For a nation has come up against my land, powerful and beyond number." So now Joel transitions to the attack of a nation, and the nation's teeth are like lion's teeth and fangs of a lioness. And then Joel 2, again talking about this nation's army. "Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is near, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness there is spread upon the mountains a great and powerful people. Their like has never been before, nor will be again after them through the years of all generations. Fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but behind them a desolate wilderness, and nothing escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses they run. Like the sound of chariots on the mountaintops they bound. Like the sound of fiery flame consuming straw, like a vast army arrayed for battle." So John takes two images back to back of judgment, of a plague of locusts and then an army coming, and he combines all the images into an army of demonic locusts with this really interesting, just heightened combination of illusions. But also, this is the next verse, which I'm pointing out because it's also alluded to earlier. "The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord sends forth his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful, for the day of the Lord is terrifying and great. Who can endure? And then a few chapters ago, when the sixth seal opened, showing that God has, or the Lamb has the power to do away with the old earth entirely, we see the kings of the earth and the great ones and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone, slave and free, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains, calling to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand? And so, again, just here are all these images that we saw, which so many of them were combined from these plagues from Joel. But also Joel does something immediately after this warning of plagues that is also going to be relevant. So, for the day of the Lord is terrifying and great, and who can endure it? And this is immediately after. Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Who knows whether he will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him, a grain offering and a drink offering for the Lord your God. And then this is in Joel, paralleling what he said earlier about the army. Blow a trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, and rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. And then I've got to include it, but only a few verses down is the famous verse, and I will pour out my spirit on all people, and all who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there will be deliverance, as the Lord has said. So we see even Joel, there's this notion of this horrific judgment being more than just judgment for judgment's sake, but but look at what could happen instead type situation. And so they have tails like scorpions and stingers, and in the tails of theirs is the authoritative power to violate mankind for 5 months. They have a king upon them. And then this is from Amos, and I have the first part italicized because it also is tied into it. But for you have turned justice into poison, and the fruit of righteousness into wormwood. Then a little bit down, Amos also references a plague of judgment of locusts. Thus did the Master, the Lord, show me. And look, the offspring of locusts were coming in the morning, and behold, one locust was the king of Gog. My bad. And so I'm pointing that up now just as a teaser for much later in the book when this is also referenced. They have a king upon them, the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew, Abaddon. In the Greek, his name is Apollyon. And like I said, John is saving to say Satan or the devil, or really he doesn't even directly say demons, and he doesn't even mention the beast, but he'll start saying all of them a lot later, and that's because of the emphasis, which will shift soon in the book, to spiritual warfare. And like what Paul said, our battle's not against flesh and blood. But here, so he uses Abaddon. In Greek, the name is Apollyon, which, like I said, means destruction. And it does, of course, have the very similar to Apollo, and the words are related. So there's this bit of irony of the Romans and Greeks, god of war, leading the army to kill and violate them. The first woe went away. Behold, 2 woes are still coming. And the 6th messenger sounds his trumpet. John hears the voice of one of the four horns of the golden altar before God, saying to the sixth messenger, the one having the trumpet, release the four angels, those having been bound against the great river Euphrates. And then, so these will not get read, but this is the good thing about doing a class every week is I can read them next time. But the Euphrates is historically, apart from the Bible, on the other side was the Parthian Empire, which was the only empire that the Romans feared. But also, in the Bible, it has a huge place for judgment because, and there's lots of prophecies about clearing the Euphrates for foreign nations to judge, including Jeremiah, which the book ends with this epic 5-chapter-long prophecy of judgment on every evil nation, and it begins with the Euphrates being used to judge Egypt, and the whole thing is building up to a judgment on Babylon. And so the climax of the whole 5-chapter prophecy is on Babylon, which the obvious association, which we'll see later, is Rome is called Babylon because they also destroyed the temple. And then this whole prophecy also closes with a reference to the Euphrates. And so the four angels, having been prepared for the hour, day, month, and year, were unbound, so that they may kill a third of humanity. And this is me now flying through the rest, and so if I fly past, we'll do review next week. And the number of the cavalry of the armies was 10,000, 10,000s twice. I heard the number of theirs. And so John saw the horses in the vision, and those sitting on them having breastplates made of fire, hyacinthine, it's a flower, so, but also can be a stone, but just adds to this surreal nightmare vision, and brimstone. And this is, sorry, flying through it, but this is, I hope you don't get nervous or with so many fast images. The heads of the horses were like heads of lions. Out of the mouths of theirs burst fire, smoke, brimstone. A third of humanity was killed by these three plagues, by the fire, the smoke, the brimstone, bursting out of the mouths of theirs. And then this is For the authoritative power of the horses are in the mouths, and in the tails, for their tails are like serpents, possessing heads. With them they violate. And this is, I had these just to point out how Jesus has this interesting combination of serpents and scorpions here and here, like the demonic army pairs scorpions and serpents in the opposite sense. And so I'll wrap up that next week. So the rest of mankind who are not killed by these plagues did not repent of the works of their hands, nor give up worshiping demons and idols of gold and silver, bronze, stone, wood, which cannot see or hear or walk, nor did they repent of their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality. So the whole thing was leading up to this, or their thefts. And then I need to end on a somewhat positive note. Then the series is interrupted. John sees another mighty angel coming down from heaven with a rainbow over his head. And so it's no just random image drawn out of a hat of a rainbow, if you remember the rainbow being God's first covenant, that he'd never destroy the earth again. And a teaser for, I guess, 2 weeks from now is after the seventh trumpet is blown, which the angel says the mystery of God will be fulfilled, the Ark of the Covenant comes out, which is a reminder of the second covenant God ever made, which is to Israel that or to Abraham, that through him his people will be a light to the nations. And so with that, we'll pick back up and finish next week. Sorry for going a little bit over, but next week will also be, this is a impromptu announcement. There's a C.S. Lewis movie at the mall at 7 p.m. next Wednesday night, and that's the only showing ever. So that's we're gonna do half an hour of class and then silence for about half an hour. If you would like to, but so if anyone would like to go see the movie, I thought that could be fun. And then
it's a documentary about his life, and or it's not really it's a movie kind of documentary, but it's him telling his story of how he became a Christian and was a hardcore atheist.
Yeah, it's not.
It looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. It's an hour long, so it's somewhat. And since it's only showing one night, I guess it's like a special thing and not quite a big movie. But anyway, so it is an hour long. So if you don't stay up too late, it should hopefully be 7 to 8-ish. But
so older people could.
Yeah. So again, sorry for going a few minutes over. It's once this train gets going, there's no stopping. But I'll close in prayer then.